Heavy snow, high winds, and flooding rains are coming as two major storm systems bookend the nation this weekend. A preview of winter? We'll see. I'll break it all down for you and show you just who's going to have to batten down the hatches right here in our weekend forecast. Hello friends, welcome into the channel. My name is Jason. I'm glad you are here to track the weather with me. I've been tracking weather for over 40 years and we'll add another day to that today. My question to you is, how long have you been interested in the weather? Put that down in the comments. That's our pinned comment for the day. I've been interested in it as long as I've been able to see, and hopefully you can tell me how long you've been interested in it too, right down below. Let me know where you're commenting from too, by the way. We've got a lot to get into today, folks. Got two big storms coming to the U.S., one on the west, one on the east. We're going to look at both of those. We're going to start here with the satellite image, and you can see plenty of cloud cover over the southeast, at least eastern sections of the southeast, but the northeast, boy, looking good down through the Mississippi Valley, the lower part of it, back into the central plains. But got some thunderstorms moving through Missouri this morning and bringing some rain, heavy rain for you all down here, some scattered showers and rain here back into the Four Corners region and moving into the Pacific Northwest too. Even got some showers coming into the eastern sections of Georgia, South Carolina, parts of Florida. So watch out for those if you're out there driving around this morning. Taking a look here at the surface map, there's that frontal boundary, came through, brought all this nice weather up and down the east coast. Well, it's hung up off the southeast coast yet again, bringing more showers and convective activity. That's going to be a pivotal player in our weekend forecast as we go through the next couple of days. Another frontal system with high pressure behind that working through the Great Lakes into the Midwest area, and that will bring some showers, as we're already seeing some in Missouri and back up through the Great Lakes today. And then heavy rainfall expected as we go through the next several days. Flood watches are up here in the Four Corners region, parts of this area, for heavy rainfall as we go through the next several days, and you can see that here in the red. And snow is possible in the higher elevations today, with more weather coming in off the Pacific into the Pacific Northwest. And that's what's going on. But we're going to pivot and take a look here at what's happening out east, because this is a big player for much of the population up and down the east coast. We're going to see clouds, rain, wind, and very, very, very high surf as tides, wind is just pushing all this water in toward the coast. And we've got pretty high tides. When high tides come in, they're pretty high right now, and see a lot of coastal flooding. This is our mid-level energy map, and we've been looking at this the last couple of days, and now the models are starting to converge on how this storm system is going to develop. There are some subtleties though, and there always are when you deal with phasing, and it comes down to just exactly when the northern piece and the southern piece of energy kind of get together. We're going to look at a couple of scenarios here. Here's the GFS as we roll this on along. Got a piece of energy down here as we get into overnight tonight and the Saturday morning, spinning up a low pressure, and that low pressure begins to take shape. You can see all of this kind of circulation around that, and then another big piece kind of diving in from the north up here. You can see it diving in like this. This is going to kind of move up this way, and those two guys are going to meet right here and get married somewhere off of the mid-Atlantic coast, and just where that happens makes a big difference. And you can kind of see that play out here. Little shortwave up north kind of stalls a little bit as we get on in toward Monday morning, and then boom, by Monday afternoon we're seeing that phasing take place into the evening hours and overnight, and then everything kind of pulls out as that occurs. Okay, so that's what's going on. We've had some models in the past kind of stall this around, but this is going to be, after it gets going, it's going to be fairly progressive. So this is going to slide up the coast, the phasing takes place, and then things kind of shift off. European shows a similar scenario, but it dives, it sort of happens, the phasing happens a little bit farther to the north and out over the ocean, and that matters a little bit here into the precipitation into the southeast. And so look here what happens. The GFS, as we go on through the evening hours, we start to see that low pressure take shape off the coast of Florida. We'll time all this out. This is 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we'll see rain spreading into the southeast, into the Carolinas, and that low pressure moves up the coast. So by tomorrow evening, there it sits off of Cape Hatteras. It's fairly weak, but it's still got that big easterly fetch, bringing lots of wind off of the Atlantic, and you can see that moisture spreading into the Carolinas back into, as we go on into Sunday morning, expect to wake up to lots of rain and some wind here along the coast particularly, but back up into the interior southern part of the northeast, back into Pennsylvania, up into New York. We're starting to see that rain spread in. By the time we get on into Sunday evening, low pressure center is still technically here over eastern North Carolina, spreading showers back in to the Carolinas, but we're really seeing that northern piece of energy capture some of that moisture, pull it to the north and pull it inland up here. And that's what's going on Sunday afternoon and evening. And then eventually, the low pressure center sort of stays intact on the GFS and merges with that upper level piece of energy here over the mid-Atlantic. And then that storm system, really, it was strengthening way down into the 900s in terms of millibar, in terms of pressure, but it's not doing that now. It looks like it's going to be a little bit of a weaker system, which would lessen the interior winds a bit. Still going to be windy along the coast, but that would be good news. Either way, rain up into parts of the northeast as we get on into Tuesday morning. That will be eventually pulling out through the day on Tuesday. Okay, so that's the timing of it. Looking Saturday down to the south, progressively more rain to the north as we go through the weekend into early next week. European model is quite similar to this. I'm not going to spend as much time on this, but I'm just going to show you it's bringing more precipitation in, more rainfall into the south, the southern parts of the southeast. But then we get a little skip here in North Carolina. Let's get this little surface low down here. Watch what happens in the next couple of frames. It jumps off the coast of Cape Hatteras and then reforms, and then now we get a little bit of a stronger signal here up into the northeast. When you have phasing, that can happen. You can have that low track kind of jump from one place to the next. Sometimes you see that when you have wedging down the apps. You have a low going up to the Tennessee Valley, and then it jumps to the coast. A little bit similar to what's going on here. We're not looking at cold air damming, but we're still seeing a bit of a jump as that phasing, that northern stream energy kind of tugs the southern low up. And when you do that, you get a gap in the precipitation. So it's possible that you could see a bit of a gap here in North Carolina where it just doesn't rain all that much. We're going to watch that trend and see if that happens. But at the end of the day, we get here into Monday afternoon, still pummeling the coast here in the mid-Atlantic, southern mid-Atlantic into southern New England, and you get rain all the way up into basically the halfway through the state of Maine. And then by Tuesday morning, lows still off the coast, so it's going to be cloudy, windy, and some showers still around. That will abate as we go through the day on Tuesday. So that's what we're looking at as far as that goes. In terms of all of the precipitation and timing out and all of that stuff. We'll look at some of the wind impacts here and rainfall totals in a second, but I wanted to get to your weather IQ question. Here it is. If you know the answer to this, put it in the comments section, or if you just want to guess. Otherwise, I'll have the answer at the end of the show. But here's the question. What was the wettest month in history across the contiguous U.S.? Yesterday, we looked at the driest month. Today's the wettest month. July, January, April, or May, and I'm not asking you the year. That would be unfair unless you're just a weather history buff. But January, July, April, or May, which one of those do you think holds the record for the wettest month in the United States? Now we're going to take a look at some of those wind and rain impacts. All right, we're going to take a look at that West Coast storm coming up in just a minute, but before we do, I want to show you the rainfall and wind impacts here along the coast. We'll also take a brief look out in the tropics just to give you an idea of what's going on out there, but we'll get into that West Coast storm here in a second. Now, you can see as I've run this all the way through the entirety of the storm, the GFS, this is the GFS, it's got an inch of rain back into western New York and Pennsylvania for much of the state of Pennsylvania, down here through eastern Virginia, North Carolina, down into the southern and eastern sections of South Carolina, back up through the coast. Coast stands to see the most rain, 4 inches up here in Massachusetts. And then look at this, almost a half an inch as you get on into parts of New York State, the upper central portion of the state, and back into the upstate and back in toward Maine. So basically half of Maine, Bangor, and Portland, places like that, you're looking at half an inch of rain. Much rain across the coastal areas where we're looking at upwards of 2 to 3, 4, even 5, 6 inches of rain in spots is possible. Now that's the GFS. Now watch what happens as we get on here and take a look at the European. You get kind of a lesser signal of rain here in the northeast and a lot less down here in the Piedmont sections, eastern Piedmont of the Carolinas and Virginia, or North Carolina and Virginia, but you get a lot more down here in southeast Georgia and eastern North Carolina. We're looking at maybe 1 to 2 inches of rain, maybe even 5, 6 along the coast down here in some of these areas, okay? So quite a bit of a difference. The European keeps that southern storm a little bit stronger to start, and then weakens it and reforms it up to the north and draws some of that moisture in, but not quite as robust as the GFS. So a little bit of subtlety in terms of how this comes together can make a big difference in precipitation amounts. Most everybody here will stand to see some rain, but just be aware that the rainfall totals could vary as the phasing becomes a little bit more clear over the next couple of days. So stay tuned to the forecast, but either way, we're going to have a strong onshore flow lots of wind coming in off of the Atlantic Ocean, piling up those waters around the coast. We're looking at total wind gusts. This is over the life of the storm, a lot less down here toward the south, but once the storm gets cranking, the Europeans got those 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts right offshore. Expect 40 to 50 along shore, and even making it into places like Boston and Jersey City down here, maybe even up into New York City as well, back in along the coastal sections of Virginia and the Carolinas, too. So look for gusts into the 30s, maybe even 40s down here, but more 40s and 50s as you get on up in here toward the mid-Atlantic and New England. We're not looking at sustained hurricane force winds, but certainly some gusts are not out of the question, particularly along the coast and around Long Island toward Cape Cod. So be aware of all of that, folks. Wave action as we get on out to the weekend. You can see the yellows are about 10 to 12 feet offshore, and then that really starts to increase and pummel the coast. Look at these waves coming back into the coast, getting up into 18 to 20, even 25-foot seas out here as this thing reaches its maximum intensity. And up here, lots of coastal flooding to be expected up into the mid-Atlantic and around Cape Cod and New England and places like that, and that will diminish as we get on in toward the week. Rip currents, definitely looking at a problem with rip currents up and down the coast today and tomorrow and the next couple of days after that. So pay attention there. As far as what's going on out in the tropics, subtropical storm Karen is not going to threaten anybody. It is moving out of the picture. There's Jerry. 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm, looking pretty rough and moving off to the northwest at 17, but it is going to do an about face quickly, get to the north and do a right hook out into the Atlantic and not really bother Bermuda or anybody else, and it's not going to strengthen all that much. And as we take a look here at the tropical Atlantic situation, told you green means go for tropical development. That is a rising air background state. Tropical systems like rising air. You know, that's part of the meteorological formula for developing convection, rising air, right? So you need that. Sinking air is not good for tropical development. Look what happens. We've got rising air till we get out into next week, and then we start to get a neutral signal, and then sinking air returns, and it returns in a big way to end out the month. So things are about as favorable as they're going to get for the rest of the tropical season. Now, that doesn't mean we can't see some tropical development as we get a little bit closer or into the United States, but I doubt we're going to see one of those big Cape Verde storms swing all the way across the tropics. Okay, so that's what's going on. We're looking at an unfavorable situation developing out there as we go through time, and so not seeing anything imminently threatening to the islands or the United States, but we'll keep an eye on any tropical waves that make it toward us and make sure that we're watching it, and I'll tell you what's going on. That's it for now with that kind of stuff. Now we're going to take a look at what's happening out west with the snow and the rains and the flooding and all of that. All right, just to show you the alert map before I head you out west. Look at all of these coastal advisories, coastal flood advisories or coastal flood warnings. Lots and lots of advisories all up and down the coast, and gale warnings off the coast. So take that stuff seriously. If you're driving around out here, if you've got property here, expect it if it's in the low-lying area that it will be flooded. Highway 12 coming up here through the Outer Banks and in the eastern North Carolina, we're looking at some flooding there. So you're probably going to see some houses fall into the ocean and all of that stuff. Let's zoom this out and get out west, and we can take a look here. See some freeze advisories this morning and winter storm watches up here for the Northern Rockies up into Glacier National Park, looking at several inches of snowfall, even upwards of a couple of feet from a big storm that's going to take shape, and flood watches up here for much of the western sections of the Four Corners region back through parts of California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, even in Colorado itself. So we've got some interesting weather coming up over the next couple of days as we take a look at how things will play out this afternoon into tomorrow. Rain, rain, rain for many areas out west. New storm system coming in will help to fuel a surface low with all of this tropical moisture being just pulled north. There's been a hurricane down here, Priscilla, tropical moisture from that, and then there's another tropical system, and tropical moisture from that will get pulled into the north over the coming days, and you'll see all of that sort of just continue to play out as we get through Sunday. So it's going to be pretty wet and dreary and cloudy for parts of the Rocky Mountains and the Intermountain West here as we go through the weekend, folks, and up in the Pacific Northwest too, with that onshore flow just continuing to bring system after system in. And you can start to see the snowfall take shape as we get on into Monday morning. And here comes, as we get on into Monday through the next week, folks, I meant to show you this, by the way. There's the storm system that takes shape Sunday. It begins to pull up into Canada, really strengthen, dragging that cold area, and that's why you start to see on Sunday and Monday, we'll watch those snow levels fall and snow start to fall itself in the Rockies and in the valleys too. Could see a few snowflakes too. And that storm system goes up into Canada, bringing high winds and blizzard conditions. More rain comes into the picture down here in the southwest as tropical moisture gets integrated. Another storm system moves into the coast of California later in the week, and that southerly flow just continues to pump the ridging here and keep us warm in the middle of the country and keep us wet out here in the Four Corners region. So lots more rain to come as we get on in toward the middle of next week. Total rainfall we're looking at, wow, down here in Mexico, much as 6 inches to 10 inches down here, but certainly anywhere in where you see all of this blue area, that's a half an inch to as much as even an inch of rain in spots, kind of on a widespread basis. We could even see pockets where we're looking at 2 to 4 inches, and we've got flood watches in place for that. More onshore flow here, and you've got lots and lots of rain here in parts of the western sections of the Northwest, Eureka, California, up to Portland and Salem, into the Seattle metro area, looking at lots of rainfall there. In terms of snowfall, most of the snowfall is going to be confined up here to the northern Rockies, but we're still going to see some of the higher peaks pick it up a little bit as we go on through the course of the weekend and through Monday afternoon, looking at as much as 2 feet of snow in some of these areas. Mostly we're going to see 8 to maybe 10 to 12 inches of snow in the higher peaks, but look, it's even getting into the valleys here too, folks. And that's what we're looking at as far as the snowfall totals out west through the course of the weekend. High temperatures over the next couple of days. Let's bring this back and center it. Looking at highs today in the 50s. Spectacular day for much of the non-coastal sections of the southeast, back into the interior sections of the northeast. Highs in the 50s. And sorry about that, getting my pen engaged in the game here. Highs in the 50s down to the 70s into the southeast, 50s and 60s across the north, and warmer out west. Cool across the coastal sections, and then 80s and 90s to the south down into Texas and Florida. Same regime tomorrow, just warms up a little bit. Highs in the 60s up to the northeast and back into the northwest. We're looking at a little bit of cooling off as that system is moving in, and by the time we get on into Sunday, looking at highs in the 20s and 30s out here with snow falling in the Rockies, surging warmth into the plains, highs into the 80s, even 90s down into the south, and cooling back off again up here in the northwest and staying cool, and gonna have some rain and clouds to deal with for much of the East Coast as we get into Sunday. As far as lows go, cool this or tomorrow morning, lows around freezing. We've already seen freezes up here, so we don't have any more freeze watches, but chilly across the north. We get back into the west, chilly as well. Where is it warm? In the central plains, where it's been warm very, very often lately, and across the south. And as we get on to Sunday morning, very cold air spilling in behind that system, pulling up into Canada with lows below freezing for much of the area. Chilly here in the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley up into the northeast, and pretty seasonal here as we get into the southeast, and of course warm in the central plains and out into Monday. Bitterly cold air for this time of year anyway, coming in as teens and 20s for lows up here in the north and to the western sections of the country. So that's what we're looking at as we go through the weekend. Take a quick look at the long range and see what kind of pattern begins to set up as we get toward the end of October, and we'll wrap up with space weather and get you out of here with the day's IQ answer. This pattern, man, has just been stuck. We've got a sort of a western trough, a central U.S. ridge, and an eastern trough, and we've sort of seen that play out over and over and over, keeping us warm in the center of the country, a little bit cooler on both coasts as wedging takes shape around from the northeast down to the upper southeast, and storms just moving into the west and heading into Canada, keeping that ridge pumping in the middle of the country. We get on out here toward next Friday, folks. Still looking at the same similar pattern, but as we get way on out in time, we start to see a little bit of a progression here. We have an extension of the Pacific jet, and this is pretty remarkably consistent on both the GFS and the European ensemble suites. And look at that. So you see this big jet extension with these big tightly packed lines that gets up into the United States. And pushes that ridge out to the east as it sort of floods the U.S. with more of a zonal flow pattern. So that would back the heat off and keep us much more normal if that comes into play. And as you can see that here, warm in the central portion of the country where it has been. We've seen bouts of warmth in the east, eventually giving way to more troughing there. Certainly troughing out west keeps us cooler out west. There comes another cool shot as we get toward next weekend in the east. Central portion of the country, the nation's midsection, still warm. We get on air toward 2 weeks, folks, and look what happens. We start to see this big troughing push into the west and then migrate to the east a bit instead of just popping off up into Canada. So by next Monday, October the 20th, we're looking at that ridge starting to lose its intensity and become replaced by more zonal flow, which backs the heat off quite a bit. That would be welcome for you all in the center of the nation, folks. But if we look at the 8 to 14 days, so that takes us basically October the 17th through the 23rd, where all of this was a little bit redder yesterday. It's starting to back off a little bit as we feel the signal here. The Climate Prediction Center starting to see that, maybe reflect that in these maps. But you can see the core of the nation, the heat will be centered over the middle of the country with a tendency for more below normal temperatures in the east and west coasts, above in Alaska and Hawaii, and the tendency for flow coming in off the Pacific to bring in showers and rounds of rain and storm systems through the west will reflect above normal precipitation chances here, keeping us below in the southeast, unfortunately, with this pattern, and above in Alaska and Hawaii there. And that's the longer range quick drive-by. Now we're going to do a quick drive-by of solar and earth activity. All right, it's all good in the hood upstairs. Nothing going on in the KP. No big X-ray flux spikes, which would indicate a solar flare, so not seeing anything there. The coronal hole has turned away. What about the wind? Well, there's Earth right here. There's the sun, and these brighter colors indicate solar wind. And as we just push this along, we're getting into the greens as we get on out in toward the end of the day on the 11th. That would be tomorrow. So over the weekend, those greens sort of push in on us. That would elevate solar wind, maybe create solar storm conditions, minor, but we get split between the big bursts here of yellows and oranges. It sort of splits us, thank goodness. That would put us in more than minor geomagnetic storm conditions, probably. So that's what it looks like. So not really looking at anything major coming in unless one of these sunspots or some sort of solar filament launches a CME. We've got a couple more sunspots coming in. They're not all that complex right now, but we're watching those. Had a couple of earthquakes, another one in the Philippines around 6.6. And one in Papua New Guinea, I think, was 6.3, so pretty moderate to strong shaking there. Nothing going around the United States right now, folks. And that's pretty much it for the show today. You've got to answer that IQ question, though. And here it is. What was the wettest month in history across the contiguous United States? Again, that excludes Hawaii and Alaska. And the answer to that, out of all of these choices, is May. May was the wettest month. And May of 2015, with an average of 4.4 inches. And the typical rainfall amount for the month of May is around 3 inches. So almost 1.5 inches above normal. It was a very, very wet May. And if you got that right, congratulations to you. I would have never gotten that right. Anyway, that is the show for today, folks. I hope you have had a great week, and I wish you a great weekend. Enjoy the weather. If it's sunny, if it's rainy, God made the weather, He made us, and we are to praise Him for that, and we will do that here, folks. God bless you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed. Join the team. Give the content a like. Leave a comment for sure. If there's anything I can be in prayer about, please put it in the comment section. Make sure to do that. Pray over you guys every day, and I pray that you have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back next week with an episode of Cold Rain's Weather World. In the meantime, Cold Rain reminding you, weather runs 24/7, but I got you covered right here, right now. 4814. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.